All right, so I'm here in Île Denise. I'm flying a Mentor 4 from Nova. It's a E&B rated to 100 kilos. I'm probably flying at about 105, 108, so I'm a little bit over the top, which will make this behave a little bit more dynamically than it would in the certification test, but it's still gonna work great. And I'm gonna demonstrate how I teach people to approach basic maneuvers on their paragliders and the kind of stuff you do in SIV, and how it blends into acro maneuvers later. And so the first maneuver I'm going to start with is the spin appreciation. And what the spin appreciation is we're just finding the spin point of the glider and letting it fly. And this is super important for cross-country pilots, so you can detect the onset of a stall and have a safe and timely recovery. And it's also really good for beginners to learn how much brake they can pull and not being afraid of using the brake range and knowing when to stop. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to slow the glider down a little bit. I have a half wrap, so I just grab the handles one time around the meat of my hands. And I'm going to slow the glider down, and I'm going to punch one side down. And I'm going to be looking up at the glider, and I'm going to see the tip start to bend, and then I'm going to feel the brake pressure get light, and the glider's going to start to turn. And as soon as I see these things happening, I'm only going to let the glider turn like 30 degrees at most. So I'm going to go hands up, and it's going to recover. So I'm going to slow the glider down. I'm looking up. I punch down, the glider spins, I go hands up, and it flies away, no problem. As long as you make sure you don't allow the glider to spin too much, it's not particularly dramatic. And when you get familiarity and comfort with the maneuver, you can let it spin a little bit more. So this time I'm gonna let it spin like 90 degrees or so. So I'm gonna slow it down, spin it, turn a little bit, and it flies away. And I let that one go a little bit further. It was almost like 180 degrees, and really 180 is about the most you want to let this go. Beyond that, it shoots a bit, and that takes a little more experience to learn how to approach. So in the beginning, little gentle spins like that are how you want to approach it and learn to get comfortable with your glider spinning. The next maneuver is the spiral dive, and the way this is going to work is I'm going to give it a really hard weight shift input. I'm going to let my outside hand all the way up, and I'm going to progressively add brake on the inside. And I'm going to be looking over my shoulder where I expect the glider to appear. And I'm looking for initially the wingtip to touch the horizon, and that's what we call the first gear spiral. And when the wingtip touches the horizon, I get it where I want. I'm going to come into contact with the outside brake to control that angle, and I'm going to smoothly exit. So it'll look like this. I weight shift, this hand's up, I add a little brake, and right now the wingtip's on the horizon. I add a little outside brake, and I smoothly release both and return to straight and level flight. But to really do a spiral dive, we need to go deeper than that. We need the nose to start turning down at the horizon. So I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to let it go a little bit further before I add the outside brake here. I'm going to take the nose to a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to enter a little faster. I'm going to add some brake. The wingtip touches, the nose starts to come down. I add the outside brake, control it. The wind noise picks up quite a bit, and I gently exit by releasing the inputs. And some people get a little intimidated by the intensity of that maneuver. And as you go lower, you can actually control it quite well by centering the weight shift. Once the maneuver's in and it's working, you don't need to keep this high inside weight shift. It actually makes the glider rotate faster. So if you center up in the harness, it makes it a lot more tolerable. So on this next one, I'm going to take it into a very deep spiral, eventually progressing into nose down. I'm going to center my weight, and when the spiral is deep like that, sometimes the glider is a little hesitant to come out. People call this a lock spiral, but it's not locked, it's a misnomer. It just needs to be encouraged to come out. And the way I'm going to encourage it is I'm going to center my weight, I'm going to add some outside brake. The spiral is going to start to come out, and then I'm going to weight shift back into that sort of first gear wing over to, or first gear spiral to control the energy and bleed it out. So I'm going to go ahead and enter. I go through first gear, second, third. It's starting to get intense. I center my weight shift. I let it add a little outside brake, and I go back into the turn to bleed it out gently and return to straight and level flight. And the next maneuver that I like to teach is the pitch pendulum. And the way this one's going to work is I'm going to intentionally induce pitch oscillations in the opposite way that you would normally learn to actively pilot. So instead of going hands up with the glider behind me, I'm gonna brake when the glider's behind me, and I'm gonna release when the glider passes overhead. And I'm gonna try to build up these pitch oscillations as big as I can. And all my brake action is gonna change when the glider passes above me. So I'm gonna start hands up, I'm gonna brake, fairly moderate, I'm gonna wait until the glider passes overhead. I release all at once, the glider dives. I wait, it passes overhead. I brake again, it goes further back. I wait, it passes overhead, I let it go. I'm gonna do one more. I'm gonna brake. It's gonna go behind me. I'm gonna go hands up and I'm gonna stop it before it collapses. If you really go for this maneuver and you build it up a few times and you give it really well-timed deep inputs, it is possible to collapse the glider. The collapse is not that dramatic. It's not a big deal. But in the beginning, we just wanna learn how to control the pitch energy. So once you know how to do your spiral and your pitch pendulum, we can combine those two maneuvers. This time, instead of bleeding a spiral out gradually, I'm going to take the spiral into a aggressive high energy configuration, and I'm going to rapidly counter steer, going to the opposite side, adding a little brake, trying to climb out of the spiral as fast as I possibly can. While the glider is behind me, I'm gonna go hands up, I'm gonna wait till it comes overhead, and I'm gonna catch the energy. So I'm gonna go into my spiral, it intensifies, I center my weight, I counter steer, I let it climb, I wait, and now I catch it. And there's a few little tricks to the counter steer in that you're trying to make the glider climb as straight as possible, so I can use some little inputs to control the roll. What you don't want to do is over control it and cause a real big bank. It's okay if it's a little off center. You want to try to make it as straight as possible, but that's not always perfectly possible, especially while you're learning. And then the next fundamental maneuver are big ear wingovers. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reach through my brakes, I'm going to grab my big ear lines, I'm going to pull one and I'm going to pull the other, and then I'm going to start shifting side to side with full weight shift. And I'm gonna be shifting at the moment my body is highest relative to the horizon, and I'm gonna shift back and forth, build these up as big as I can. And when I'm ready to exit, I'm just gonna hold the weight shift in instead of changing. So I pull one ear, and I pull the other, and I shift my weight, and I shift again, and I shift at the top, and I shift again, and I shift again. And when I wanna exit, I just center my body and dampen it out just like a spiral, and I just let the ears out and give a pump if they need. Once people have a good familiar with all those maneuvers, then we go through the collapse series. And I actually like to introduce people to the front collapse first, because there's not much you have to do. You just pull the collapse, you go hands up, and it recovers right away. And I'm going to demonstrate how that works. I'm gonna drop these brakes entirely. I'm gonna reach around the front. I'm gonna grab all my A's. It's really important that I make sure they are my A's. I follow them to the leading edge, and I have all of them. And on the count of 3, I just pull them down, and then I release it. So 1, 2, 3, pull the glider down, and I go hands up. And I don't have to do anything at all. Sometimes the pitch is a little dramatic, but most of the time, especially on a lower end glider that's not as highly loaded, it just opens right away, and you just have to wait for it to recover airspeed. And then the next maneuvers we do after the front collapses are the asymmetric collapses, and they work very similarly. I'm gonna pull just one side, and the glider's gonna have a tendency to dive this way, so once the collapse is in, I'm gonna need to counter steer by weight shifting and maybe adding a little bit of brake. So I'm gonna pull that collapse in, counter steer a bit, and I turn just like 90 degrees, and I hold it, and once I'm flying straight, I just let it out, and maybe give it a pump if it needs. And I can briefly do the same thing to the other side. So I grab my other A's, 1, 2, 3, pull them down, control my heading, a little weight shift, and I let it out. Give it a little pump if I need. So here on the next flight, we're gonna do stalls and spins and all the good stuff that people really come to SIV for, and it's gonna be a good time.